everyone, and welcome to the Sports Hit List. Today we got a little NHL Playoffs update for you. To my right, Charlie Brucia. To my left, Andrew Vanech. And to my far left, Charlie Baldi. Guys, let's get right into it. Montreal Canadiens versus New York Rangers, round one. 2-1 advantage for the Canadiens.
I think the Rangers blew their opportunity in Game 2 because they had a chance to go up 2-0, but they gave up that late goal in the third period, and then they proceeded to lose in overtime. So they came back to the Garden where they played terribly, and they lost. So now they're in a must-win Game 4, or else they're going to head back to Montreal down 3-1. So it's not looking too good for them. I believe that they blew it.
Now, I believe that the Rangers blew it way back at the trade deadline for not picking up the big scoring defenseman that they needed. That's the big thing that they're missing. And I think another difference is the goaltending. Lundqvist is past his prime, and Carey Price is still the best goalie in the league right now.
The Rangers definitely messed up in Game 2, and the effects lingered on in Game 3. They just put them in a totally downplayed mental state. I'm not counting the Rangers out, but they're going to have to get that goaltending from Henrik Lundqvist to match the playing of Carey Price.
Well, I mean, the goaltending throughout the first period of Game 3, Henrik was there to make every save, but they just were not able to generate anything offensively. I commend VC for trying to go into the zone, carrying the puck, but nothing was working. Couldn't get anything going. The one lineup change I want to make them see, I want them to bench Kevin Hayes and put in Pavel Buchnevich. Have JT Miller play center. Hopefully they can get a little jump out of that line. Next series, we have the Ottawa Senators and the Boston Bruins. Ottawa up 2-1.
I believe that this series is more of Boston beating themselves more than Ottawa beating Boston. Because in Game 2, Boston blew a 3-1 lead in the third period, and then Zdeno Chara, who is a veteran defenseman on that team who has won a Stanley Cup, took a stupid penalty with under a minute remaining. And then that power play carried over into the overtime. And even though Ottawa didn't score on the power play, they scored a couple of seconds right after the power play ended. So that was a win that they should have had going back to Boston up 2-0. So they basically blew it, and now they're looking at a 2-1 hole.
Again, I think Boston's beating themselves. They have the better team on paper. You look at it matchup for matchup, they have the better team. Tuukka Rask, I think, is the better goalie. But Ottawa's just playing smart and letting Boston beat themselves.
Boston is the best team in that series, and again, they are the best team on paper. Ottawa caught some good breaks, and they're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, the two people really carrying Ottawa right now are Erik Karlsson and Derek Brassard. I mean, he was carrying the Rangers there for a while, but when they first traded him, looked like a good trade. Zibanejad would come in, get the job done, but once Zibanejad got hurt, hasn't panned out too much. But all I got to say is Rask hasn't looked his best since he won the Vezina back in 2013. But hopefully Ottawa can pull this off. Hopefully they get some confidence out of this. All right, next series, we got Pittsburgh Penguins versus Columbus Blue Jackets. Pittsburgh up 3-0, look like they're going to sweep.
Yeah, I think maybe Columbus might get one at home. But other than that, I don't see them winning this series. I think Pittsburgh's done. I think Pittsburgh already has the nail in the coffin. I believe that they're just going to steamroll through the East regardless. I believe that's because Pittsburgh doesn't need their top players on their top line. So their lines are more evened out compared to other teams, and I think that they're the team to beat.
Well, I think Pittsburgh definitely has the benefit of having two world-class goalies at their disposal.
They were riding high.
And Bobrovsky was playing fantastic.
But again, I think cockiness came with that, and they're in a 3-0 hole. And like my colleague Charlie Baldi said, they might get a game, but if anything, I don't think they're going to make a comeback.
No, seriously. I mean, Columbus they look lost right now. I mean, they probably knew what they were getting themselves into, but they did not mentally prepare at all. I mean, Bobrovsky can only carry them so far, and I kind of feel bad for Tortorella in a way because as of now, he's just getting paired with bad luck teams. Got paired with Vancouver, didn't make the playoffs, got fired shortly then after, makes the playoffs with the Blue Jackets, and they're down 3-0 right now. So it's unfortunate for them.
And the Penguins, though.
True, and it's amazing how well they're playing with all the injuries they have. And last but not least in the Eastern Conference, Washington Capitals versus Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs somehow have a 2-1 series lead in this.
I believe that if you go and take out a dictionary and look up the word choking, you would see a picture of the Washington Capitals logo.
Would it be Ovechkin?
It's the whole team. They have been choking for the past, since I remember. That team can never get over the hump in the playoffs. I don't know what it is. And on top of that, Toronto could very easily be up 3-0 in this series, which is even more shocking. I think it's because Mike Babcock has that team prepared. They're young, but they're gritty, and they fight, and I think they just have more heart than the Capitals.
Yeah, I think Toronto, they remind me of the Islanders in 2013, a young team breaking into the playoffs. They played very well against Pittsburgh that year. The difference is Babcock. Back in 2013, the Islanders had Capuano, who is at best an AHL coach.
Toronto had a chance to make the playoffs. They earned it, and they're taking advantage of every second of it. Yes, they could have won game one, blew it, but they responded very well in the last two games. And right now, you punched Washington in the mouth, and you had yourself a series.
Yeah, especially Toronto has the right balance of veteran leadership, like Brian Boyle and Matt Martin, compared with the young guys, Matthews, Nylander, and Marner, who they've been playing phenomenal all season long. And Marner's speed, he showed it off on Ovechkin on that breakaway. He validated his NHL 17 skating stats right there. They're all mostly 96, just putting that out there. On to the Western Conference. Let's get right down to this series. Chicago Blackhawks versus Nashville Predators. Chicago's down 3-0. This is definitely the surprise of the playoffs for me, because I had them going to the final.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Chicago. I don't know. To be honest, I don't even know where Nashville came from. During the season, Pecorine looked terrible at times, and that team just looked awful. They never really put it together, but I guess they flipped the calendar month to April, and something clicked upstairs, and that team's flying. And their first line with Forsberg and Arvidsson and I believe Johansson is just too filthy, and Chicago can't stop them.
Well, Nashville started clicking at the right time, and Chicago decided to not. They had their struggle. They're starting to struggle now, which is the worst time. And it's like you really don't know what's going on because they're not even playing that badly. Just Pecorine is playing like an animal, and Nashville scoring. Everything's clicking for them on offense.
Pecorine, after the first two games, had 2 more points than anybody on the Chicago Blackhawks roster.
Yep.
So he helped Nashville earn those 2 wins, and their offense alone, like dropping 5 goals in game 2. But Nashville right now is scary. Like, I haven't seen Chicago look this bad.
The only problem I have with Nashville, they're another team never made it past the second round. Rene, last year, it was either last year or the year before, loses in a Game 7 in the second round. So that's the one problem I have with them. They're another team that seemingly can't get over the hump, just like the Capitals. But, I mean, they're actually playing to teams that are outworking them, outbeating them, out-everythinging them, so to speak. Next series, St. Louis Blues versus Minnesota Wild.
You want to know something? I'm starting to get sick of the Blues, and I'll tell you why. Because before last year, I always had the Blues advancing deep into the playoffs, but they would always lose in the first or second round. Yeah. So last year, I picked against them to kind of reverse the magic, and they ended up winning. So now this year, I was like, So I picked against them again, and what happened? They're up 3-0 right now. I don't understand it. I believe that team is really good and very underrated. They traded away their best player in Kevin Shattenkirk. So I don't know how they put it together, but that team looks really good.
Well, I would say that Shattenkirk being the best player is a little bit throwing shade to Tarasenko. But
yeah, you're right. You're right.
But no, I think they're just the better team. Everyone was on Minnesota's hype train this whole year, and I just didn't see it. I always just saw them petering out at the end, and that's not quite the end, but it's a little bit past it. But yeah, they're just petering out. Dubnyk can only play so well for so long.
Sure.
As a hockey fan, I always love what the Blues have done in the recent years because of the talent they've had. And I kind of wanted to go against them this round because Minnesota was on some crazy hopped up train of adrenaline going into the playoffs. And St. Louis just responded, and look where they are now. They have Minnesota on the ropes as well.
Dubnyk playing so well for so long. Now, keep in mind, I picked him in the 4th or 5th round of my fantasy draft. He carried my team almost the entire season. Minnesota played horribly down the stretch, and I knew that was going to come into the playoffs. I knew they were going to be playing like that. So I had the Blues in 6, but I definitely didn't see this coming.
Yeah.
But I mean, Mike Yeo is definitely saying, hey, Minnesota, F you guys. I mean, in all seriousness. Next series, Edmonton Oilers versus San Jose Sharks. What is going on with the Sharks the past 2 games?
I think the injuries killed them. They coming down the stretch, they battled with injuries, and I think that's lingering into the playoffs. And I believe that they need to find a way to shut down McDavid, because I think McDavid, no pun intended, is the oil that runs that whole machine.
No, you're absolutely correct.
No, exactly. And so I think that if they could find a way to shut down McDavid, and Edmonton has to find ways to score from their other lines, I think they're going to find some trouble. So I think San Jose needs to focus on shutting down him and then score goals on Cam Talbot, who has looked very good this postseason.
Well, that's what a lot of teams do against the Islanders. They shut down Tavares, and then the rest of the team just doesn't score. But like they said when he was drafted, McJesus, and he's panning out to be that.
See, the Sharks are the defending Western Conference champions, but Edmonton is fully invested in their team. They want it. The fans want it. The team wants it. They're giving out concession passes. McDavid had wheels in Game 2, the nice 5-hole goal. So right now, I think the Oilers are just going to give it to the Sharks straight up.
Yeah, San Jose, another one of the teams that played horribly down the stretch the past 2-3 weeks of the season. Near the very end of the season, they went on a 6-game losing streak. Once that happened, I kind of knew Edmonton had the advantage in this series, but I mean, their defense needs to wake up. And I mean, no offense to Martin Jones, but he's not playing anywhere near the level he was playing in last year's playoffs, where he carried them to the Cup final. Last but not least, we got the Anaheim Ducks and the Calgary Flames. Charlie, you had the Flames going to the Cup final. What the hell happened?
Well, you see, I picked the Flames because I thought that was a team that got hot at the perfect moment. Their key players like Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau were playing phenomenally. But for some reason, they thought that the NHL playoffs were only 2 periods instead of 3, because they either had a lead or were tied going into the 3rd period, and they decided to not show for the 3rd period and then proceeded to lose. So they could very easily be up 3-0. But yesterday, I think, was the backbreaker, because they blew a 3-goal lead, which is the worst lead in hockey. And now they're in a very steep hole, and I don't think they could dig themselves out of it. But this was the team that I thought was going to go far, and they let me down.
To me, they're a lot like the Bruins, where they're just beating themselves, and they're just not playing well. Like he said, they're only playing 40 minutes of hockey. They need to be playing 60. They're getting caught flat-footed in the 3rd period, and that's just what's killing their playoff hopes.
Anaheim, I think, has been playing good hockey, and the Flames haven't. Basically, Anaheim's like, okay, you're going to give us the first round like that?
Well, I mean, another thing, Calgary, their game does not match up well against Anaheim's, because once you start beating down the Calgary with all the hits and everything, it kind of renders them useless. I mean, Gaudreau and Monahan can only do so much, but if you look at Gaudreau, he's a small guy.
Their team is small. They're just a small team compared to the Ducks.
Yeah, and plus, picking up Eves at the trade deadline for Anaheim, that has worked wonders so far. And even though Cam Fowler on the back end got injured, their defense is still playing good.
Yeah.
So they have a chance to go far. I have them losing in the conference final to the Blackhawks, but that's probably not going to happen at this point. All right, and that's our playoff update. This was the Sports Hit List. This was Charlie. I'm Michael, Andrew, other Charlie. Thanks for tuning in.